Thank you, Caoirling. So here we are, passing emergency legislation in the Dáil arising from Brexit. After the referendum on the 23rd of June 2016, I said in the Dáil, and many other people said it at the time too, that it will be an awful shame that so much time and effort has to be given by government and by opposition and by public administration generally to dealing with the fallout from Brexit, and so it has come to pass. So we have 31 days to go to March 29th. We have 11 Dáil sitting days. I would suggest that this legislation has come to us a little late, but we will scrutinise it as best we can. It was only published last Friday. It's a very complex piece of legislation, and all credit to the civil servants who prepared it from across many departments, and we now have to do it justice. In relation to the withdrawal agreement, we are hoping that Westminster will pass it in time. I'm not sure what the other options are. I'm not sure if there's a possibility of a new deal between the European Union and the UK involving a legally binding codicil in respect of the Irish backstop. Obviously, a new deal would need the agreement of the European Commission. There's also the possibility of an extension to Article 50, and now into the mix Labour has thrown the possibility of another public vote. I think it's worth stating again that the political stability in the Republic of Ireland at this time should not be taken for granted, arising from the confidence and supply agreement by Fianna Fáil to facilitate this government. I'm not sure that everybody gets the immediate threat to jobs, to living standards and to the public finances arising from Brexit. I think the effects will be seen immediately, and people's standards of living is under threat, and I think people need to realise that. At least the Dáil is sitting this week to pass this emergency legislation. The Dáil has not been dissolved, and I think most people will appreciate that. So the Brexit Omnibus Bill has 15 parts. It involves 9 government departments. I suppose essentially it aims to secure the provisions of the Common Travel Area, and in effect it aims to maintain existing arrangements and deal with the immediate issues to ensure continuity generally. I hope there's nothing new being slipped into this bill, no new measures, and I think we need assurances on that. I know the Minister said that 2 amendments were approved by the Cabinet today, so we need full openness in relation to the bill, and that things aren't being slipped in that we don't know anything about. So in relation to the bill, obviously it deals with health, and in particular the cross-border directive and the treatment abroad scheme. I think that's to be welcome. It deals with the Industrial Development Act and the remit of Enterprise Ireland. Again, welcome. There are provisions in relation to the single electricity market. I know that these are only precautionary, and it is hoped that these provisions will not be needed. There's provisions in relation to SUSI grants under the education heading, and again that's a very practical measure that students will appreciate. The Minister has outlined all the financial provisions in the bill just now, and I think the VAT deferral item is of particular concern and will be welcomed as part of this bill. There's provisions in relation to transport, the Harbours Act, our ports, and I'm glad then that our buses will continue to travel north and south over the border, and that our trains will be able to do likewise. I think citizens will also appreciate the provisions in relation to social protection and to ensuring that benefits continue to be paid. A lot of complex provisions in relation to justice, in relation to extradition, in relation to warrants, in relation to immigration, in relation to the common travel area, visas and fingerprinting and so on and so forth. And I know that those with an interest in justice issues will appreciate all those particular provisions. So we have this legislation. This legislation is not the be-all and the end-all. I think we do need to be kept informed on all the other measures that the government is taking, the issues that come under the EU competency, all the issues that arise there. There's talk of 20 statutory instruments being implemented. Also, I think we need more information, as other speakers have said, in relation to additional measures being taken, particularly in relation to support for our SMEs and also for the agricultural sector. Minister, I'm glad you're there this evening because I wanted to raise the issue in relation to Dublin Port, which is in your constituency, and the contingency planning which is taking place in the event of a no-deal Brexit. The Department of Transport, I understand, is examining the possibility of parking lorries at one of Dublin Airport's long-term car parks to avoid traffic jams in respect of Dublin Port. In a no-deal situation, it is envisaged that congestion on the M1, the M50 and in the Dublin Port Tunnel is a real possibility, or leading up to the Dublin Port Tunnel, arising from customs delays. So the suggestion is that the Dublin Port Tunnel may be closed and that alternative routes will have to be used by these trucks in order to avoid this congestion. I think that would be of real concern to Dubliners. It would be of real concern to my constituents. If the Dublin Port Tunnel is closed for any length of time, the whole city snarls up, and that happened last Monday. I think it was Monday, to the best of my knowledge. So really, the Department of Transport, the Minister for Transport and Transport Infrastructure Ireland, who manage the Dublin Port Tunnel, will have to give this issue serious consideration, because the one thing that will annoy people immediately in the event of a no-deal Brexit is traffic chaos in the city and leading into the port. And I really hope that all the interested parties are dealing with that particular matter at this stage and preparing for it. Just in relation to the situation in respect of Northern Ireland, it's good to see that business and farming interests are making their voices heard at this stage in relation to the whole Brexit situation and the effects that it will have on them. Unfortunately, the North's politics has become very polarised, as we have seen in recent elections. I was very interested in the comments of the SDLP leader, Colm Eastwood, at the Fianna Fáil Ardèche, when he said that there is a place in hell for those calling for a border poll at this volatile time. To have a border poll at this time, to throw that into the mix, I think would be very, very counterproductive. And I think that's something which moderate voices need to put forward in a very forceful way. I've also spoken in this House before about the deterioration in Anglo-Irish relations arising from the whole Brexit situation, and other speakers have mentioned that here this evening. The peace process brought to an end, I think, hostile relations. 800 years of Tyrian oppression, as some people like to refer to it, and we have come a long way since the Good Friday Agreement. And I think a lot of work is going to have to be done by government, by all of us in this House, members of the Oireachtas, with our colleagues across the water, to restore good, harmonious relations, because that's in the interests of our citizens. We have so many connections between our peoples, and it is something that I think we do need to be concerned about. I do have concerns in relation to the level of preparedness that we have at this stage in relation to Brexit. My colleague, Deputy McConalogue, mentioned the issue of recruiting customs officers and veterinary inspectors and so on. There does seem to be confusion about that and whether we are doing what we need to do and fulfilling previous commitments in relation to the recruitment of those personnel on time. Also, state aid for particular sectors of the economy. We need more detail on that in relation to SMEs and in relation to the agricultural sector. I could conclude on this particular issue, and it's just to make some reference to the European Parliament elections coming up in May. Deputy Shortall spoke of the need for voices of reason at this time. We have the rise of populism, particularly of the hard right, and I do think that citizens need to give the European Parliament elections serious consideration, to give careful consideration to the people they elect, to ensure that the European Union functions effectively for all of us who subscribe to liberal democratic values of the European Union.
Now, Deputy Mayor.